So you've probably heard these saying, cardio is killing your gains. Well, in that case, why are there bodybuilders like Sam Sulek promoting cardio in the first place? Well, today, I'm gonna answer the age-old question, does cardio actually kill your gains? And everything you need to know in order to not do too much damage on the muscle building side. Let's get into it. So keep in mind, I'm gonna be taking a very practical and realistic lens on this topic. I know in fact that majority of you watching wanna do a combination of two things. One, build muscle, and two, lose body fat or at least stay lean. Those are pretty much the two most important things to build an aesthetic physique. But regardless, by the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of when cardio can be interfering with muscle growth, when it doesn't, and how to incorporate it smartly into your routine. Let's get into it. But real quick, people, let's address the elephant in the room, and that is how good my shoulders subtly look in this Able Attain Seamless t-shirt right now, which you can get at Able, and you can get 10% off using code PATH. They make, in my opinion, really high quality gym wear while being at a pretty affordable price. And they have a wide array of different styles. As you have seen in pretty much all my recent videos, I am a big fan of this Able Attain Seamless tee. It should be restocked by now. They told me they will restock it by mid-August. So if you're looking to cop, be sure to act quickly because boy, do they sell it pretty quick. So back to the topic at hand, there are a few ways cardio can be interfering with your gains, but keep in mind there's a big difference between limiting / hindering your gains and straight up losing you muscle. Obviously, losing muscle is the worst of the two, so let me address that first. Really, there's only one scenario that I can think of that is realistic for the average person, where doing cardio can potentially result in you losing muscle, and that is if it puts you in a big caloric deficit over a long period of time. Now, to give you a quick crash course on how this works, when you do cardio, imagine this is the amount of calories you burn and this is the amount of calories you consume. When you do cardio, the amount of calories you burn within that day increases. And the difference between the amount of calories you burn and the amount of calories you consume is your calorie deficit. Now, I would say for most people, the cardio you're doing is probably not putting you in that big of a deficit because generally speaking, when you do excess cardio within the day, your appetite's gonna go up, so naturally you'll eat more calories than before. But let's say you're already dieting and you're trying to maintain a caloric deficit by eating less calories. On top of that, you're doing a buttload of cardio because you're trying to lose body fat as quick as possible. Not the route I would recommend. And I wouldn't recommend that because being in a big caloric deficit will inevitably cause you to lose some muscle. So really, it's not directly the cardio that's causing you to lose muscle, it's the resulting total caloric expenditure on that day that is increased and maybe not accounted for. And the good news is it's pretty easy to avoid. You simply eat a little bit more to account for the calories burned. And unless you're running a marathon every other day, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Let's say you're not in a caloric deficit, but you're still doing cardio. In that case, you're probably not gonna be losing muscle from cardio, but how can cardio be interfering with your overall muscle growth potential? Well, let me get into that. Now, the first one is that cardio increases the activation of your sympathetic nervous system. And as a result, you'll get less activation in your parasympathetic nervous system. Now, in layman's terms, your sympathetic nervous system is essentially your fight or flight response. It downregulates things like digestion and promotes action. While the parasympathetic nervous system is pretty much the opposite. It promotes relaxation, digestion, recovery. This is, of course, the state you want to be in when you're recovering, as well as building muscle. And when you do any form of higher intensity exercise that increases your heart rate, so cardio included, but also weightlifting, this tends to activate your sympathetic nervous system. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but technically speaking, if you're doing a cardio session after your workout, your sympathetic nervous system is likely to be activated for longer compared to if you didn't do that cardio session. And the net result of that is that it can technically hinder your muscle growth. In other words, it can slow down the rate of your muscle growth to a certain degree, but it's not going to completely eliminate it, meaning you're not going to be losing muscle from this. There's a huge difference you need to understand there. So that is the first way cardio can limit your gains, but there is a second way that's a lot more tangible to understand. And that is quite obvious, cardio increases your fatigue. Now, there's two common scenarios where cardio is increasing fatigue, resulting in you not being able to build as much muscle. Now, the first scenario, if you do pretty high intensity cardio before a workout, well, simply put, you're likely not gonna have as much energy to actually be lifting weights. And as a result, you're not gonna be able to perform as well on these sets. You're not gonna be able to do as many reps as before. You're not gonna be able to do the same amount of weight. You're just not gonna be as strong. As a result, the net mechanical tension that your muscle is gonna experience in that workout session is likely gonna be less than if you didn't do the cardio beforehand, which means as a result, you're not gonna be reaching your full growth potential from the performance side of things. In other words, you probably can be providing your body a better stimulus if you didn't do the cardio session before getting juicy. Now, the second scenario I see playing out where cardio is gonna be impacting your fatigue and thus resulting in less gains is that doing cardio without enough rest in between can potentially impact your later workouts on another day. For example, if you do a pretty intense cardio session, let's say hill sprints or like a 10K run, and then the next day you have to train legs, well, I guarantee you're not gonna be able to train legs as well. So as a result, it pretty much has the same net effect as before. You're just not gonna be providing as good of a stimulus on whatever muscle you're training because your performance isn't as good. So realistically, those are the main ways that cardio can be limiting / killing your gains. But something else that can be killing your gains that might actually even be worse than doing cardio is following flat out bad gym advice. So if you're looking to take the guesswork out of getting to your fitness goals, eliminate all the BS, then I highly recommend you apply my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program where I help you do just that. Custom workout programs, nutrition advice, the ability to ask pretty much all the questions you have and get them answered, as well as weekly check-ins to monitor your progress and make sure they're actually heading in the right track. I'm putting some transformations on screen right now, let it speak for itself. So if you're interested, you can apply in the link in the description. Let's back to the video. Now before you never do a single lick of cardio ever again because of what I said earlier, despite everything I just said, I still ultimately recommend that you do cardio, and here is why. And all this, to some degree, will be advantageous for overall aesthetics in my opinion, or at least your overall quality of life. Now, first off, and most obviously, it improves your aerobic capacity. That is your reason for doing cardio. But on the weight training side of things, this can translate to you recovering faster in between sets. You having a higher tolerance for cardiovascular fatigue on a bigger lift, like let's say bench press, squats. Basically, you'll be able to do more reps and thus maximize mechanical tension further, since you'll have a better time catching your breath. Secondly, it is super helpful for fat loss as well as staying lean. Now I'm gonna tell you right now, being lean is the most underrated factor to your overall aesthetic. That's why you'll see if you're on TikTok right now, there's a big push on this lean maxing trend where people just wanna stay lean and aesthetic. In fact, I would go as far as saying that for the average person out there, you losing body fat will probably do more to your aesthetics compared to you trying to maximize muscle growth. That's why I would take a lean gains approach over bulking any day. But of course, that is not the topic of this video. Perhaps I should make an update on that, or you can check out this video I made before on it. Third factor, it improves your overall heart health. It is a health play. Obviously, having a healthy heart is correlated with living a longer, fruitful life. I don't think I need to explain why that is a good thing. And the fourth thing, and probably a little bit more controversial for me to say, that is, it makes you an overall more capable human being. I'm willing to bet that unless you're a competitive bodybuilder or a competitive powerlifter, most of y'all not only want to look fit, but also actually be fit across many different spectrums of athleticism. So not only brute strength, but speed, agility, endurance. And even till this day, even though my weight training routine is more bodybuilding style, guys, I can still crank out a sub 6-minute mile on site. Like, I am confident with that. And by the way, I don't really even train for the mile. I ran sprints in high school, guys. But honestly, guys, in a more practical scenario, having good cardio just makes going about life quite literally easier. That's why when I was traveling in Singapore, Taipei, Thailand, I was pretty much averaging 20,000 steps daily, and I didn't feel overly tired or anything at all. I was just having fun. So yes, while cardio can interfere with your gains to a certain degree, I promise you, incorporating cardio is still a good idea and will benefit you in many other ways. So now here's the most important part of the video. Here's how you can do cardio without killing your gains, or at least minimize cardio's overall impact on your gains. So I'm gonna rank this in order of importance. Now, rule number one, don't let cardio put you in a huge caloric deficit. This will actually cause you to lose muscle. So at the end of the day, eat more to compensate. Number two, prioritize lower intensity cardio and try to keep the sessions relatively short, let's say under 30 minutes. And this is simply because the higher the intensity and the longer the duration of the cardio, the more of an impact it will have on your overall fatigue, which then of course impacts your overall recovery, so it's just not good for building muscle. Now this doesn't mean you can't do higher intensity cardio sessions or longer runs, but I just want you to be aware that there's a trade-off you'll need to make there. Which is why rule number three is separate out your cardio days from your workout days. This way, your cardio session isn't gonna impact your weight training session as much. At least intra-workout fatigue isn't gonna be an issue. Now, rule number four is if you have to do cardio on the same day, try to at least train different muscle groups between the cardio session and the workout, as well as try to get a snack or a simple meal in between. This will help minimize the direct interference cardio might have on that target muscle group. For example, if you go on a run right before you train legs, you're not gonna be able to train legs as hard. And the snack, meal, hydration you're getting yourself in between will help replenish your energy just a little bit, which is probably worth something on your overall energy. Now there's a couple more things you can do if you're doing cardio on the same day. So let's call this rule 4B. If you're gonna do cardio the same day as you're lifting, do the cardio session after your weight training session. This way, at least, you're gonna get your workout in, you're gonna be able to perform at a high level, strength is gonna be there, and the cardio session at least isn't gonna directly interfere with your workout. Now, of course, you're still gonna have that increase in sympathetic activation after your workout, but at least you know that the cardio session is gonna be impacting the strength side of things in that workout. And finally, rule number 4C is if you're gonna do cardio before your weight training workout, at least try to keep the intensity low and keep the session duration at most 20 minutes. Now by low intensity, I'm literally talking about like walking on a treadmill or something. And then a quick extra tip, if you're doing something especially taxing like some sort of marathon race or high rocks, I would honestly consider taking a few days off of lifting for those subsequent days after the race. And that's because fatigue is gonna be a big issue and your training performance is probably just gonna be pretty awful. And secondly, because you're in such a fatigue state, you should probably just be focusing on recovery. But if you're thinking in your head, Tyler, I really don't wanna hurt my gains, but I still wanna get some cardio-like benefits, such as an increase in burning calories, well, here's what I suggest. And that is simply to aim for a high daily step count. In other words, I simply want you to walk more on a consistent basis. And that is because walking is low enough in intensity where it shouldn't overall impact your fatigue that much. On top of that, it is very practical. You can literally use it as a form of commuting, especially if you live in a big city. In fact, I would go as far as saying that moving to a walkable city is probably one of the most underrated things you can do to increase your total caloric expenditure. And as a result, considering that you're eating pretty clean and you're still working out regularly, you're probably gonna be able to lose body fat and have a more aesthetic physique by living in a walkable city. And also the thing with walking is it's not just a constant cardio activity you're doing with no rest. Naturally, if you're just walking and going about your day, there's gonna be times where you're resting, such as when you get to your destination, and thus fatigue again is less likely to be an issue. And then I would say a close second to that would be bicycling as a form of commute. Again, it not only helps you burn more calories, but it's also a great mode of transportation that also shouldn't be incurring all that much fatigue. In fact, this is what I was personally doing when I lived in Chicago for 2 years. And honestly, guys, that is something I personally miss because I'm definitely not gonna be doing that out here in LA, guys. So man, this was a banger of a video in terms of information, guys. Now you have a good understanding of how to both do cardio without it completely derailing your gains, so you get the best of both worlds and work towards achieving that aesthetic physique. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave down in the comments, what is your favorite form of cardio and why? Hit the like button, support my page, hit subscribe to level up your physique, and hit the bell notifications to get these videos as they come hot. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.